Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely decode the often abstract jargon of ACCA Chapter 15 and build a really clear mental model of how different assurance engagements actually work. If you've ever found yourself totally tangled up in the terminology of audit versus assurance or positive versus negative wording, you are definitely in the right place. We're not just going to read definitions to you today. We are going to unpack these concepts so you can mentally grasp exactly how the scope of an auditor's work fundamentally alters the final guarantee they provide to stakeholders. All right, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Audit versus non-audit assurance. 2. Attestation versus direct engagements. 3. The assurance hierarchy. And 4. How scope actually impacts the auditor's wording.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Audit versus non-audit assurance.
So, what exactly is assurance? Fundamentally, it's defined as the level of confidence, or, comfort, that a practitioner provides to end users regarding a specific subject matter, just to help them manage their risk. The really crucial point here is that assurance is essentially an intangible product. When investors or shareholders or lenders hire a practitioner, they aren't buying a physical good off a shelf. They're literally buying peace of mind. They are paying for a comfort level that helps them navigate financial and operational risks, because they absolutely need to know if they can actually trust the numbers being handed to them by management.
And this perfectly illustrates the main divide. On one hand, you have the traditional audit of historical financial statements. We all know this one. It's highly regulated, incredibly rigorous, and it acts like a deep dive forensic investigation into past financial data. It's what everyone immediately thinks of when they hear the word auditor. But contrast that with non-audit assurance services. These have a way broader focus. We're talking specialized reviews of sustainability reports, IT systems, maybe even forward-looking financial forecasts. So while a traditional audit is strictly looking backward at the financials, non-audit services are providing varying levels of comfort on a whole host of other operational, non-financial metrics.
Moving right along to Section 2, Attestation versus direct engagements.
What's really fascinating about these two is the contrast in who actually takes the very first step. In an attestation engagement, the client actually does the math first. The company's management prepares the data, they measure the subject matter, and they put it all together. Then, the practitioner comes in to verify it. But with a direct engagement, the practitioner completely bypasses that first step and handles the entire measurement and evaluation process themselves.
Let's cement this with a quick analogy. In an attestation engagement, there's a two-step flow. Step 1, the client measures. Step 2, the practitioner gathers evidence to assure the work. Think of this exactly like grading a test. The client, the company's management, takes the test first by putting together their financial statements. The auditor just acts as the teacher, coming in as a secondary step with their red pen to verify the answers are actually correct. The auditor didn't write the answers, they are strictly attesting to the accuracy of what was already there.
By contrast, in a direct engagement, Step 1 is the practitioner measuring, and Step 2 is the practitioner immediately reporting. Using that same analogy, this is like the auditor writing the test, taking the test, and grading it themselves to directly generate the assured info for the end user. There's no pre-existing client report to review. The practitioner just goes in, gathers the raw data, evaluates it against the criteria, and hands the final assured result straight to the stakeholders.
All right, on to Section 3, the assurance hierarchy.
When we break down the levels of assurance, we obviously have reasonable and limited assurance, but absolute assurance, that sits at exactly 0%. There is simply no 100% guarantee. Why? Well, because an auditor can never test every single transaction. You've got inherent limitations, stuff like the use of sampling, the fact that accounting figures often involve highly subjective estimates, and of course, the ever-present possibility of management fraud. Because of all that, practitioners operate purely within levels of reasonable or limited comfort, never absolute certainty.
So we map this out on a spectrum based on the depth of the investigation. At the very top, for reasonable or high assurance, you get deep, comprehensive testing. Think of it as a full-scale, exhaustive medical exam with blood work and MRIs. Then in the middle, moderate or limited assurance involves much lighter analytical reviews, maybe just a standard physical checkup. And way down at the bottom, negative assurance involves quick, surface-level checks. It's essentially just taking a quick temperature to make sure nothing is, completely on fire.
And that brings us to our final section, scope and wording impacts. The absolute golden rule to remember here is this: the scope dictates the work, and the work dictates the wording.
High assurance demands exhaustive evidence gathering. The auditor is doing deep, substantive testing. They're recalculating figures, getting external verifications from banks, the whole shebang. But limited assurance relies on far lighter procedures. The auditor is mostly just asking management questions, doing basic inquiries, and looking at analytical reviews like, hey, do this year's numbers look roughly similar to last year's? It is a mere fraction of the work.
Because the scope is so incredibly thorough in a reasonable assurance engagement, the auditor actually has the confidence to use positive wording. They can state flat out, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects. They are making a definitive, affirmative statement. They did the heavy lifting, they did the deep testing, so they can stand there and confidently declare a positive outcome.
But consider how radically the legal meaning shifts for limited assurance. Because the auditor only did a light review, they legally cannot say, in our opinion, this is fair. Instead, the wording flips to negative assurance. They say, based on our review, nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe the statements are not prepared fairly. It sounds like a convoluted double negative, right? Because it is. They're effectively just saying, well, we didn't look incredibly hard, but in our quick glance, we didn't find anything obviously wrong. This is a vastly lower guarantee for the investor, and it completely changes the risk profile.
So, to wrap up, I want to leave you with this question. The next time you read an auditor's report, what level of comfort are you actually buying? The difference between positive and negative wording isn't just semantics. It is a massive indicator of how thoroughly those numbers were actually tested. Always check the label, read the conclusion carefully, because the specific phrasing tells you exactly how much risk you are truly taking on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gave you a solid, clear mental model for navigating the world of audit and assurance.